Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Commexis Cast Daily, all the news you need to know from our inbox to yours. I'm Matthew McGroarty, the videographer and podcaster here at Commexis, and today I'm joined by the lead strategist at Commexis, Philip Brooks.
Good morning.
So our first story today is from Fast Company. It's by Stephen Melendez, and it talks about a new wave of malicious ads that are actually hitting some, bigger sites and name brand sites, such as, the New York Times and the New Yorker and stuff like that. So just a quick overview of kind of what's happening. Users end up going on these sites, typically on their mobile device in particular, and say they're on a Twitter, they click a Twitter link to the site, and a malicious ad decides to load up and brings them and redirects them, rather, to a different site that is basically a mirrored copy of it with a different URL, and then they kind of get trapped there, so to speak, with one of the traditional "you've won this" messages. So that's just something to keep in mind. The rest of the article kind of goes through programmatic advertising and how some of these malicious ads can kind of be put out there through unscrupulous means. We don't necessarily need to go on that. We've talked on that a ton before previously in the show, but I just wanted to share a couple statistics specifically regarding ad blocking, which is one of the things that Stephen ends up going into a little bit more towards the end of his article. One of the fears is that people seeing these malicious ads are going to be using ad blockers more. Personally, I think they're going to be using ad blockers anyway, regardless of the rise of these ads or not. But one of the stats from Chris Olson, CEO of the Media Trust, which is a company that provides security services to ad providers and online publishers. Over the past 2 years, we have seen the amount of malware and mobile redirects, which might lead to malware, roughly double in the digital ecosystem. And PageFair, which studies ad blocking, said in a 2007 report that ad blocking usage had grown 30% in the previous year. I know personally, it doesn't matter if there's malicious ads or not. I'm going to use an ad blocker regardless. But it is important to note that for those of you who perhaps don't use an ad blocker or who have not known about this, Chrome ad blocker is going to be releasing tentatively, but that's what Google says. They're going to be releasing February 15th, which is about a little less than a month away. So what I'm interested in personally is I wonder if ad blocker installs are going to go down once ad blocker gets installed. That's
actually an excellent question, and one that I hadn't considered. But I think we've talked about this before a little bit, and we talked about kind of the concerns about what sorts of ads Google is going to allow through its own ad blocker, and and if that really puts a lot of people at a disadvantage, or if it's really in the end geared at improving the user experience. And I think that's something that we're going to have to wait and see on. But that's a good point, man. I hadn't thought about that. Will this compete? And what will it do to people that have ad blockers already installed as a plugin or an app? Is it going to, in some way, disincentivize the usage of those in Chrome? Or
I'm interested, especially because I know personally I end up using, I think I use 2 ad blockers, just because one tends not to be enough depending on where you're at on the internet. So
where are you going?
Nowhere that bad, don't worry. But the one thing I do worry about, which is something they actually do mention in the article, is depending on what websites you go on, even some websites that are actually relatively credible, about like crypto mining in the background using your GPU, which I don't like. So if you ever decide to go watch videos online or something like that, be careful if you're not on like YouTube, because that could happen, which is something I do not like at all. Anyway. The reason I'm also interested in if they'll go down is because, most ad blockers, they say when you sign up, like, hey, we get to look at your internet history and things like that. So I'm interested in if people will look at this and go, oh, maybe I can, not give my information to a random third party because I already give it to Google anyway. But I don't know if that's probably going to be in the thought process of most people. But
I'm sure the average internet user is not somebody that's savvy enough to install both a VPN and multiple ad blockers.
That's true.
So, but I think it's good to be educated on some of the things that you're exposed to when you're out there. So I think again, we're gonna have to take a wait and see attitude with how the Google's version of ad blocker, does it take something and make create a disparity on the market? Do they really, boost particular ads over others? And we really have to kind of see if they're really genuine in their saying that it's going to improve the user experience, or if it's really just another ploy to, give a more tighter rein on the types of ads that they allow through, and make sure that the advertisers they are find more desirable are the ones that get the priority.
That's a good question. Well, our second story for today in our episode that is mostly focused on security actually involves Google and Symantec. So Philip wants to take it away.
This is an article from Search Marketing Daily by Laurie Sullivan. This is a quick follow-up to yesterday's post about site speed and how it affects rank and how it being a ranking factor. This is another piece that's probably going to roll out in the next version of Chrome, which is version 66. Sometime they're saying March 1st to April 17th, somewhere around there. But what they're talking about is any Symantec issued SSLs or certificates, security certificates, are going to be disallowed in Chrome. So they don't specify exactly what it is that they feel about Symantec's certificates that they don't find to meet their standards. But regardless, if you're on a site that's using one of those, you're going to find that you're going to start getting delisted from some of these trust factors, and basically your site's going to be listed as not having any security certificate at all. So there's a couple of different things. So Google's always looking for a secure web experience for their users. Again, they're not particularly transparent as to what it is about the Symantec security certificate that they're concerned about.
That was actually my first question. I was wondering what the problem was.
Yeah. So, but here's what'll happen if you're currently using a Symantec security certificate. It's a tongue twister. I'm sorry. But any pages that you may get a trigger warning regarding the trustworthiness of entering that site. It'll remove the browser display that says that site's actually secure. It could basically remove you from the possibility of using paid search. You could wind up with ads that are getting disapproved because they're linking to unsecure pages. And if you're not using an HTTPS certificate, obviously that's a major trust factor for any site, especially if you're a retailer or e-commerce site that accepts payments and things online. So if you're using a Symantec issued security certificate, make sure you talk to your web developer about some alternatives out there. There are plenty available, your hosting service rather. So I would definitely look into that. And again, if it's something that you're not sure about, make sure you find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before it becomes a problem.
And we'll be sure to keep you guys up to date on any other changes, and I'll look to see if they offer any reasons behind the Symantec discertification, so to speak, because I'm definitely interested in why that is happening. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to today's episode of the Commexis Cast Daily. Check us out on Monday for the latest trending news. Thanks.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Go Birds.